the last 150 years, one of the great novels of the 19th century.
Do you think they can guess?
Yes, you could guess. Yes. You're right. Brothers Karamazov.
You are right.
Yes, there it is. And one of the great novels of the 20th century,
Ta-da!
Finnegans Wake. And so we will attempt, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to read them recently, to sum up very briefly, 4 or 5 minutes at most.
Just to refresh your memories.
Refresh your memories. Brothers Karamazov is about a family who reminds me of my family, my dear family. There are 4 brothers and a very licentious father. And the father takes away probably the inheritance of one of the brothers. He never takes care of them when they were young at all. They just run wild or
running in the yard.
Yep, or shipped out to other people to take care of. And so one brother, Dmitri, wants his inheritance. And the father keeps playing with him and won't give it to him. And then there's a woman who has been abandoned by an officer who made love to her when she was 17, and she likes to play with men. Everybody's got their hobbies, right? And she plays with both the father and the son, Dmitri. And they're both extremely, especially the son, extremely jealous. He loves this woman.
She whips them into a frenzy.
Yes, into a frenzy. We wouldn't do that in Cambridge. We're beyond
No,
this.
this isn't Cambridge.
Yes. There's another brother named Ivan, who is, from the horror of this family, has retreated into his mind. And he thinks about God, like, of course, all of us do in Cambridge, and thinks that even if there is a God, he reads the newspaper, this world is just too painful. God, you might be there. I don't accept your world. I don't accept your world. When I get to be 30, I'm going to give up the ticket you gave me to be born, and I'm out of here. And he writes an extremely moving story, a fable, called The Grand Inquisitor. Some people think it's the best political commentary on our world even now. And very briefly, The Grand Inquisitor is about an old cardinal in Spain in the 1500s where they're burning heretics at the stake. And Jesus comes and sees what they're doing, and the Grand Inquisitor says, I know who you are, and I tried to follow your life when I was young, but guess what, Jesus? People can't live the way you did. They can't be free in their spirit and find what their deep spirit wants them to do. No way. That most people will just kill and get as much as they can out of life. And so get out. I could kill you, but get out of here. And Jesus just bends over and kisses the Grand Inquisitor on his forehead and leaves. No comment other than that. And Ivan tells the story to his younger brother who had been living in a monastery. And is a very saintly brother. And so these are the 3 primary brothers. Dmitri, the passionate one, Ivan, the intellectual one, and Alyosha, do I have it right? Mm-hmm. Alyosha, the younger one, and there's one more, Shmerdyakov, who was born when this sensuous father, saw a mentally and emotionally deranged woman and made love with her. Why not? Nothing to do else for the evening. And the child from that offspring is called Shmerdyakov. And he is the butler and the cook of the house. So that's really the basic dynamics of this story. I don't think I'll tell you any more, because it's a great struggle between the Alyosha type person who wants to be forgiving and loving and thinks we're all responsible for all of us, really. We're responsible, and that the problems in the family, if you look carefully, you can see how each of the brothers created the hatred that's going around. They're all, and Grushenka contributes to the problem, and other women, which we won't go into at this moment. So we all contribute, we're all co-creating the problems in our family, says Dostoevsky. And I'll let you read the book to find out how they deal with these things. Okay, so that's in less than 4 minutes. The Brothers Karamazov. We will now have Finnegans Wake, which is even harder. And Tim has up to 5 minutes to sum up that for you.
Well, let's see if I can do that. So the basic interpretation of the wake is it's a dream of a man. It takes place in one night. So that's a nice framework for everything that happens in it. But if you read the book, you get the impression that it's much more than that, that there's too much wordplay, there's too much intelligence, it's so rich that one has trouble thinking that it's just the dream of a rather simple-minded character in Dublin. But anyway, it again is about a family in this dream. And there's the father, there's the mother, there's 2 sons, and there's a daughter. And because it is a dreamscape, or that's one interpretation, Joyce can layer many types of personalities onto those 5 people. So they actually have multiple personalities, multiple forms. Some of them will trade places. It gets very complicated. Some of them split into 2, split into 7, split into 29 characters in the course of the novel. But if it does have a story to it, it appears that the father did something very terrible in the park, or something very terrible happened to him. And he is then reviled by the city through gossip. He seems to be brought to trial, and this may be just an anxiety dream of his. And the more we get into it, it seems that the 2 brothers may have actually participated in the park and done something terrible to him, in addition to whatever crimes he may have caused. It seems like he's been viewing some women, either peeing or somehow exposing themselves in the park. And after the trial, the mother tries to abdicate him. She's going to exonerate him with a letter that she's having one of her sons, she's dictating it to one of her sons. And then we get into the center of the book, which gets even more complicated, more dense. And it is in these chapters, one of them in particular, where the 2 brothers team up against the father and overthrow him. Let's say overthrow, because they could have done something violent to him. They could have humiliated him sexually. They did something to him. And this seems to release them to then become ascendant in the family. And it's the second generation, again, of maybe the father's anxiety that he'll be replaced by his children eventually, which is something we all witness, just in the course of time. And then there's the daughter, and she is actually being sought after by both the father and the sons. And it sounds very incestuous because everybody, the entire world history, is overlayered on these 5 people. So it's either incest or it's just, all the tales that you've ever heard about passion and lovemaking and procreation, but it's told in the context of this family. Then we come to the 3rd part of the book. There's 4 parts. And in the 3rd part, one of the sons seems to have gained supremacy. One of the sons has shrunk. The other one is, after the father's been overthrown, gets to experience several adventures. One, he seems to have a career where he's a singer, a tenor. One of them is, I'm trying to think what the second one is. The second one, is very important because he's with the daughter and all of her friends, and he seems to have gotten all the attention, admiration of the next generation of women. And in the 3rd one, he seems to have a nervous breakdown. And in the 4th chapter of that book, he's basically reduced to a child asleep in his bed once again, and the father has somehow unexplainedly returned. And the last book of Finnegans Wake is very short. It's sort of a ricorso. It's preparing the dreamer to wake up out of this long sleep that he's had, and the family is again a family as opposed to playing all the roles of everybody in the world. So, and then the book ends with a very beautiful elegy where his wife seems to she seems to be passing out of the world. Maybe she's passing out of the dream, and she floats down the river and joins her father again, who is represented by the ocean. Wow, we did it.
I loved it. I loved yours. So that's what it's about.
Yes.
So
That's one interpretation.
now it's easy for me then to ask, rather than, is why did you want to compare the Brothers Karamazov with Finnegans Wake? Because Tim is going to go to Europe and give this as a paper.
Yeah, this is just, we're just having a freewheeling discussion here based on a paper idea I had. So I was reading that third book of The Wake, and naturally the theme of parricide is shared by both books, and this is, recognized by Joyce scholars. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, how about some other things that are going on? Because there's a parable told in both stories, and you did a terrific job of introducing the Grand Inquisitor parable in Brothers Karamazov, but there are several of them in of these little pantomimes or stories or parables in Finnegans Wake, and the one that caught my attention was the one between these two characters called, it's about the aunt and the grasshopper. And it is a tale about basically forgiveness, where one is carefree and the other one is the aunt is always collecting everything and storing things away for hard times. Well, when the hard times come, just like in the tale we all know of the ant and the grasshopper goes to, or in this case the grasshopper, goes to the aunt, and rather than ask for forgiveness, he forgives the aunt, which is very peculiar and makes you wonder about it. But in both these tales, both the parable of the Grand Inquisitor and the aunt and the grasshopper, there is an act of forgiveness, a kiss by Christ to the Inquisitor, and the grasshopper unexpectedly asking forgiveness from the aunt. And then beyond that, and I already mentioned it, the character of one of the brothers actually seems to have a nervous breakdown, which reminds me of what Ivan Karamazov goes through in Brothers Karamazov, that after he realizes that possibly he's planted the seeds without realizing it in his writings, that he planted the seed in Smerdukov that everything is allowed, and it's sort of a Nietzschean idea.
If there's no God, says Ivan, if there's no God to judge us, then people can do whatever they want. There's nothing to fear the consequences. Be brave.
Exactly. And he was doing it from maybe an ethical, philosophical standpoint, but Smerdukov, who had been insulted and injured all of his life, serving as a lackey in the family, took these words and decided to do in the father, Fyodor. And they have some conversations after the fact, and Ivan seems to realize that, oh my gosh, maybe I played a crucial role in this. He's overcome with guilt, and he has a brain fever or a nervous breakdown, and he actually talks to the devil at one point in a very interesting chapter. So they both have that as well. And there's something else I mentioned, is that the father and the son are interested sexually in a young girl. And that the two books share that as well. So then I got to thinking, that's an awful lot of structural similarity between the two books, and it's never been really discussed as far as I know. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to just explore that a little more.
And you were interested in forgiveness in both.
Right, because it boils down to forgiveness and who is forgiving whom. And we can understand in Karamazov, in the 19th century novel, that this was a time of great, deep spiritual novels, people asking ethical questions and setting out moral precepts through examples. You can think of a number of examples. The Tolstoy is much like that, and there are English writers as well that would do this. And when you get to the 1920s and 1930s, when Finnegans Wake was being written, there'd been a whole sea change in terms of literary technique. There was like a revolution in techniques, and Finnegans Wake is a very experimental novel, the way it's written. Some people don't understand a word of it. They can hardly put together a sentence and make any sense out of it. But despite that, so there's a sort of a sense of being separated a little bit. There's some separation, there's some irony that's introduced into 20th century literature that you don't see in the 19th. So you wouldn't expect there to be a really strong earnest moral statement in a book that's written under those circumstances. So the question of forgiveness in Finnegans Wake is very subtle. That keeps coming up. I told you the one parable, but again and again and again, one brother is asked, can you forgive your brother? And these two brothers are constantly battling. Well, within the structure of the Wake, it's kind of a stylistic thing as opposed to a moral thing, I think, that they're polar opposites. And so if one was to forgive the other, the polarity would collapse.
One was an artist and one was a solid postman.
Yeah, sort of a bourgeoisie.
Yes, it was just like Joyce and his brother.
Yeah, and maybe it was also that he would have become, the person Joyce would have become if he'd stayed in Ireland. And
would have been like his brother.
And because Joyce once had ambitions to be a tenor,
Mm-hmm.
and sure enough, in this one chapter, the one brother seems to be enjoying a tenor's.
The solid one. The solid brother, not the artistic one.
Yeah, is having a career as a tenor. So forgiveness would destroy this polarity. Is one way to look at it.
And what you mean by that? They wouldn't be fighting anymore?
They wouldn't be fighting. They wouldn't exist anymore. They might just annihilate one each.
There's so much need. I've been with people like that. We need to fight each other. Yes.
Exactly.
Hopefully not anymore. But
so that sort of undermines the idea of forgiveness and all these questions being asked of the one brother. Could you forgive your brother? No way. I could never forgive my brother. These long passages like that. But the book itself, if you think about Finnegans Wake, if it is the story of all civilization, all of mankind, when the waking occurs, when the dream is over, it all does collapse. And so there is a sort of a giant reconciliation of all these odd types and all these struggles that we've seen in the Wake are suddenly reintegrated into the dreamer once he awakes. So is that an act of forgiveness?
Or maybe better than.
Or an act of acceptance, maybe is a better word?
Or maybe even better than that. That it's easy for me to say it's better than that, but that we are together. That all these wars that we've been fighting in ourselves and with others, we eventually, did you know there's less wars now than ever in human recorded history?
Well, we should break open a bottle of something.
Yes. Well, this is our show. So it could be, or people, or the fights we have internally to make peace with those. And maybe it's beyond forgiveness. It's just discovering, oh my, I have many personalities and they don't need to fight one another anymore. Maybe they can accept each other, but maybe acceptance is so unexciting. As you would say, it ruins the party.
That's right. But save it till the end, okay?
Yes, but instead of accepting, okay, we have this there's a difference between struggle in the theater or in the movies and in our lives. And so maybe we can eventually get to the point where the struggles we feel in ourselves, maybe even with each other, this is probably a very silly thing to say, but we're going on in Ukraine now, or everywhere, between the rich and the poor in America. Maybe there's a way to reconcile those struggles? I don't know. I mean, they're powerful struggles, going on, whatever side you're on. I'm just saying between people who have power and people who don't, or inside ourselves, the patriarchal stuff we have in us, the father, and then the more egalitarian part. That seems to be easier to make peace with that than it is outside of us.
Inside. Oh, well, they're both real challenges, though. wouldn't you say?
Yes. To say the least. Now, Dostoevsky's book, the biographer, great biographer, Frank, said it's, as we were saying before the show, a very political novel. It's not just a personal novel. It's about socialism versus spirituality.
Right, and trying to explain or describe all of the conditions in Russia, that each of these brothers represent some aspect of Russian intellectual
Yes,
life.
Ivan was saying even if there is a God, which is an interesting argument, not there isn't any, even if there is, he's done such a lousy job, I don't care for that God, and I'm not interested in it. And even if eventually we're going to heaven and it's all very nice, it's not worth the price of one child suffering. Ivan used to collect
That's right.
stories from the newspaper.
Terrible stories.
Of what happens to children. I will not share them with us now. We have our own lives anyway.
This is a family show.
We have our own families. We know what we're talking about. So,
can we get to that point of, we're talking about forgiveness.
yes.
If we go back to Karamazov, we know the story of the Grand Inquisitor,
Yes.
and that Christ kisses him. But at the end of the book, too, there's this giant summing up where after all the travails of the family, the young spiritual brother, Alyosha, is with some young children, and he's trying to teach them to love one another. And the last cry in the book is, "Hooray for the Karamazov." And it's a very strange, some people have interpreted it to say that that is a sort of an all-embracing of all these contradictions, all these struggles within all the Karamazovs. And that's something we need to do. So in a similar way, it's a giant acceptance.
And I would say maybe even more than acceptance, a celebration. Hard to celebrate your father
Yeah,
when
hooray.
hard to celebrate your father when he's stealing your inheritance and trying to take your woman away from you. That seems, what would you do? How would you celebrate that?
Get over it.
Wow. Well, thank you for tuning in. We have solved all of your problems. Get over them.
Exactly.
So there must be something about even the next acceptance is really great. There might be something about celebrating them. In some ways, this is who my father is, and I will protect myself from him. And then I can, at the distance of a book, or seeing him from afar, I can celebrate him. Maybe that's what it's like, and so I can love you and celebrate you and enjoy you even from afar.
Well, especially as you get older. I mean, my experience, and probably a lot of people's experiences, they read Brothers Karamazov when they're young, and they identify with the spiritual brother, the earnest spiritual brother, Alyosha. And but as one gets older, and one experiences passions, and one has conflicts in one's life, one begins to realize that, well,
Or more like Dmitri and even Smoryakov for some of us.
if you kill somebody.
Yes, or feel like it, yes.
Uh-huh.
Or feel like it, or think about it, and think everything's permitted. I can do whatever, all kinds of.
Or an intellectual that just sort of loses his attachment to the world and people and his heart, and like Ivan.
Yes, identify with all that. And then you're stuck with the thoughts and the theories you come up with when you are like that. When you're brilliant. The Grand Inquisitor is very brilliant. You're kind and see Jesus' kiss as forgiveness. It could be. It could be acceptance. It could be I have nothing to say to you, maybe, or maybe the kiss was so, I doubt it, so powerful that it would. No, I don't think change the heart of the Grand Inquisitor. I doubt that.
I wonder about that. I mean, he seems broken at the end. I think he's sitting with
The
his...
Grand Inquisitor? Oh, gee,
Yes.
that would be interesting. I mean, after the story is told by Ivan to Alyosha, Alyosha kisses him on the forehead.
Exactly.
And Ivan says, "No fair. You've stolen that from my story."
Plagiarism.
But he was touched by it.
Yes.
So maybe you're saying, which I love, we only have a minute and less than 2 minutes to go. So then both of the books seem to be working with one another, as in some ways reconciling our struggles and either accepting, as you say, or perhaps celebrating them. And there's more to say. Maybe we can get you back again when you write your second draft of because they are journeys too. It's an acceptance when in some ways you're free from some of the horrors of your father trying to destroy your love life and financially. And once you can break free of that, then you can maybe celebrate him.
And once he's dead.
That too, yes. That too is. Well, we have 1 minute to go. If there's any way we want to sum up our.
This is one other thing I'd say is that Joyce admired Dostoevsky. He particularly admired Brothers Karamazov. He only said a few things about it. He was very struck by the power of the violence and the descriptions of passions. He loved the way Dostoevsky basically smashed the conventions of the Victorian literature and really showed life very raw and violent. And I don't know if intentionally, there's no record of it, but a lot of this carries forward into the violent inner workings of Finnegans Wake.
Right. Thank you for joining us. Much waking to all of us, much harmonious embracing and celebrating our family after we can stop them from hurting us.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim, so much for coming on.